I think one of the conclusions that we have to draw about Mrs. May and her book is that... Where is the book now? I think I've slid it into some... Oh, here it is. Here we are. One of the conclusions we have to draw about Mrs. May and her book, and I read it very quickly, really, and perhaps I didn't take it all in, is that this is an effort to rehabilitate her and to set her up for what? Being one of these noble elite, being one of the old guard, being one of these people in charge. Well, she's never going to be in charge. She wasn't really in charge of her party when she was Prime Minister, so I don't see how she's going to acquire that sort of ghostly aura now she is out of office. And this book certainly doesn't do it for her. And she's trying to present herself as a reasonable moderate, as somebody who was trying to bark down the ERG and the Rees-Moggs and all these other, the Nadine Dorrises and all these other people who had taken the Conservative Party over to the right. But she was part of that. She was the person who coined the hostile environment. She says that she regrets it, or she regrets the way it's been interpreted, but she was in charge of that, and she was Home Office Minister for long enough to be able to control the interpretation of that branding. And the Home Office ministers who followed her have simply carried out her Project Hate. So she is being disingenuous if she tries to distance herself from what, for example, Suella Braverman is doing. When Suella Braverman stood at the dispatch box and screamed, "Invasion!" Mrs. May might just as well have been behind her, prodding her up the backside. So, in 2019, after Brexit had been voted on, and May was struggling to get her thing through Parliament, she could quite easily, at that point, when the ERG was stopping her, and she couldn't get, quote, the best deal that she wanted, she could easily have turned round and said, well, let's have a referendum. In fact, we got very close to having a second referendum. Very close. She almost secured a majority for that in opposition to her government. And she should have just gone for it. But no, she didn't want a second referendum. And instead, she preferred to scupper her government and to make way for Boris. A second referendum, if she'd had one, would have been a win-win for her. Her deal would get approved by the public, if not by her own people in Parliament. Or Brexit would be abandoned and we'd stay in the EU, as she had, in fact, recommended when the first referendum took place. And the rise of Boris to replace her would have been destroyed. But she didn't do that. Instead, she tried very hard to appease the hard Brexiteers and to do this rather than to and to keep her party happy rather than to act in the national interest. So I think, this effort to rewrite history is fake. Utterly, utterly fake and wrong. And in the end, I think it will go down as one of those great failings. One of the many failings of Theresa May.